Okay, so I have a blank canvas here in my DAW, which is Studio One. It's my preferred program. I've been using it since I was like 14 years old. Um, so I have a lot of years of experience with it. A lot of people will prefer, Fruity Loops, Pro Tools, stuff like that. But I'm just so comfortable with this program that it's my go-to, especially for something like making beats. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started here. First thing I want you to notice, and anybody who is just getting started with making beats, maybe you have some musical experience, but there's a lot more that goes into producing beats than just, knowing music theory and song structure and stuff like that. So we're going to start showing you here. I have the this song set up to be 48 kilohertz. Now, I'll show you. Song setup. The lowest you can go is 44.1 kilohertz. You really want to at least be recording at 48 kilohertz. Right now that's what my sound card is able to do. You can definitely get higher. Truthfully, even 44.1 kilohertz isn't a terrible audio quality. A lot of this is going to be indiscernible to the human ear, but especially when you get to the mastering process later on, it's going to be important that you go with the highest quality that you're able to do with your sound card. Okay. So you can see I already have a track loaded up here. That's just for my microphone as I'm recording the video. So you can just ignore that is there. So typically, what I'm going to start with, these are all the sound sets that came with Studio One. And that's usually where I start. I take a piano sound. And I got to think like, well, what type of beat do I really want to make right now? I make all sorts of beat, pop, boom, bap, trap, really anything that you can think of. I got my hands in it, and you're gonna find it all has different tempos. So like boom bap is gonna be anywhere from like 80 to 100 BPM. Whereas if you're making like a trap or a pop beat, you're going to want to start typically at 120 at a minimum. Now this gets a little confusing because, a lot of time you can play a beat at 120 BPM and you're really playing it at 60 BPM. You're just getting the extra click. So I'll show you how the click works. So I have my metronome selected. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now 120 BPM. I'm gonna like beatbox this for you. It'd be like. Sorry, there's some delay on my microphone, so it might not be clicking just right. Whereas 60 BPM is more like. So you'll find in a lot of trap production and pop production, they have these really high tempos. So they're going all the way up to like 180 sometimes. But realistically, they are actually playing their song at 90. The added benefit in pop and trap music when you raise your tempo is going to be when you're playing with your hi-hat especially, you can do a lot of those interesting rolls. I'm going to turn off the metronome here. You can do a lot of those interesting rolls with the hi-hat that you hear, especially in trap productions. So I'm gonna make like a trap pop song. My preference is typically to go, you know, a little dark, a little minor. That's really the American rap scene, is even with like more popular poppy stuff, you know, you're not writing a song in a major key. So I'm gonna go ahead, a very standard way to start a trap type of song is going to be at 140 BPM. My MIDI device is acting up right now. I don't really even know what's wrong with it, but the pitch bend is bending notes randomly and just screwing up my whole track. So we're going to do the whole thing inside of the piano roll here. All right. So I'll start with an E minor. Now basically in the beginning, you're just getting your chord structure going. You know, you don't have to get crazy or anything. You're just starting with, I'll show you. And I'm just going to stick with, I'm just going to swap back and forth between E minor and C. And I'll tell you why I like, you know, a real basic chord progression. Melodies are more catchy when you have a basic chord progression. But that is an opinion. That's not a fact. That's just my opinion. Your melodies have a, I don't know how to explain it exactly. When I write a complex chord progression with a lot of notes in the chords, so right now I'm just going to use basic 3-note chords. I'm not going to get into major seventh, minor seventh, augmented, any of that stuff. So the benefit of using more complex chord structures is that you can put more notes inside of your melody. But to be honest, the added notes, they typically take away from like the real catchy or pop element of a song. It's great for like if I was doing a boom bap beat right now, I wouldn't even mess with basic chords. I would do all, you know, jazz chords, and I would make it a very interesting progression. But for here, the chord progression is not going to be super important. You know what, I'm going to have to turn this down right away. Now, I tell you another little trick that I like to do when I am making a trap beat like this is that I like to have like in this is all the chord progression is going to be for this song, just these two chords. And you can see that the G and the E are going to run all the way through this chord progression. And boy, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I will explain why that's important later, but it's always a good idea if you can, with like a catchy poppy trap song. Well, poppy might not be the exact right word because it's not going to be like bubblegum pop, but it's going to be pop like as far as pop star on the radio, DAW baby type of beat. But it is a good idea to have a single note that runs through all of your chords. This is a nice simple chord progression. I can have 2 beats. So all I'm doing here is I put my 2 chords down into the piano roll, and I'm just copying and pasting the segments here. All right, So, I guess I wasn't too far ahead of myself. This is something I discovered, you know, like when I first started making beats, I would have been using, you know, just the VSTs and the drums that came with the program. And at that point, it didn't occur to me to use this technique that I'm about to show you. So this right here, these are sample packs. Cymatics is my go-to. They have a bunch of free samples, which are really nice. But what we're going to use are drum one-hits. So I'm going to go to my trap starter pack. I have, and this has loops and all kinds of cool stuff that you can use in your productions. But right now I'm just finding drum one hit. So we'll start with a hi-hat, find a nice sound that we like. Alright, so I'm going to send this to the piano roll. So now I have a sample, and if I had my MIDI up and running like I'd like to, I could just, you know, play my drum pattern on my keyboard. Okay, so I think, so I want to set it up. So the only drawback that I have in using samples, like this, and this may just be a drawback of my program, I cannot control the velocity of the hits. So I can't make it go like, you know, I can't make every hit its own volume. But I'll show you how I go about offsetting that. So if you'll recall, just a minute ago, I told you it's a good idea to have notes that run through every chord. So in this one, I have the G and the E. So what I'm going to do, since I have my sampler going with my drum one hits, I am going to tune them all in here. So most one hits, I'll show you here. Sorry, this is like a lot of information to get out at once. You can see they have the tuning of like the snare drum and stuff. If it's not marked, it's safe to assume that the tune is C. That's the standard one-hit tuning. Any melodic one-hit sounds should be tuned to C. So this hi-hat, I'm assuming, is C. It's usually C or it's very close. Hi-hats don't have as much tone as a snare or a bass drum, so they don't really have as much of a tune. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure every hit is played on the E note, and it's going to create a really nice blend for my music. So this is usually how I started out. Just very simple. 1, 2. There you go. And then later on, I'm going to spice that up a little bit. So I'm just going to have that running throughout. Then I'll find a snare. I'm just going to pick something simple, tuned to C, because if it's tuned to C, then every note you play on the piano will be accurate. Whereas if I pick this snare, which is tuned to G, then as I'm using this method of having a very finely tuned drum pattern, I'm going to have to transpose it. So if it's G, I always just have to count. So G is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 up from C. So every note that I want it to play, I have to go 7 up or 7 down. Or no, not 7 down. I'm sorry. It would only be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down. So I'm just going to avoid that for this video. So I'm going to add my snare into the sampler. And you know, for now, and this video is getting to be a little longer than I wanted it to be. So I don't know if we're going to complete this beat here. I'm just going to show you some of the techniques to get a beat started. You know, we got the bare bones going. So that's way too high. We're in C3. There it'll be. And like I said, this would be a lot easier if my MIDI controller was working right now. Oops. So like I said, this isn't my preferred method for putting the drum track down. Usually I can just tap it out, but this works too. So this drum pattern is sounding very vanilla right now, but that's just because I'm putting in the basic elements of it. And then I can mess with what they're going to do later. So like I said, if you don't see a tune with the sound, it's safe to assume, especially if it's coming from a reliable source like Somatics, that it's tuned to a C. So that's how I'm going to treat it. Now the bass drum pattern is usually the first one that I actually make the correct way. Sorry, there's some delay on my mic. Usually I'll be kind of like rapping along with my beats as I make them, but it'll sound ridiculous with this little delay my mic has. Alright. So what you're going to want to do now, so this is the basic beat. Now, if you're not aware of this, you should be. in hip hop in general, you're working on 16 bars at a time. And a lot of people aren't really aware of what that is. I hear some beat productions that, and you know, it's up to you. You don't have to follow the standard pattern, but for a standard rap song, you want 16 bars in every single verse, and then usually an 8-bar hook or potentially a 16-bar hook as well, if your song is gonna kind of rely more on the hook than the rapping. So I am going to create variations in the drum pattern to make a full 16-bar verse have you know, some varied elements. Kind of change it up a little. All right, so I'm just gonna count this with you and show you. I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So each of these is a bar. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to have a slight variation. And usually I start with my bass drum. Slight variation at the first mark of 4, and then a new variation at the end. Usually my first variation for my drum pattern is gonna be about the bass drum, and the second will be about the snare drum. See, like that. All right. Now I'm going to show you how to make the little rolls everybody loves in rap. You're going to want to set your markers to be 32. And I'll show you. It'll go. All right, that's where we want the first roll. You know what? No, we're going to change that. We want the first roll right here. And I'm going to create some variation in the sound. Yeah. You know what? Actually, see, sometimes you'll make a little mistake, and you just got to roll with it. I mean, you don't have to roll with it, but sometimes things happen for a reason, you know what I mean? All right, so I actually love the way that sounds. So I'm going to loop this portion, and then I will create a little variation at the end of the first 4 or first 8 bars. Bars rather, I'm sorry. You know, maybe it doesn't, maybe I just need the variation at the end of 4. Yeah, we'll just make the first variation at the end of 4 bars. And you know, every song is different, so. And sometimes the best thing to do is just kind of be random with it. And just see how it sounds. See, I like the way that sounds. So I'll copy this verbatim. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change up the variation here at the end. Let's take a listen to how the variation turned out. So we're going to add another roll right here. As you can see, I'm using, well, actually, I'm using all the notes in the scale, or really right here, it's just for the chord of E minor, although this is happening over the C chord, so we'll change that up a little bit. All right, so if I loop this twice, ooh. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah. So this is half of a verse. This would be about, you know, what you'd want. Oops. About what you'd want your hook to look like too. So just for reference, I'll show you the time here. Should be at least close to a minute for a full 16 bar verse. Although I have noticed a lot of rappers today are sort of going off of the 16 bar verse and really relying more on hooks. So you got to kind of think about your audience. I do hear some rap songs that really only have an 8 bar verse and just these massive hooks, you know. And that piano sound, you know, I'm not married to that. That's just going to be point of reference here as I move forward. So I think that's going to be my next step. This is my verse. So I am going to go to my melodic one hits. And we'll start with some kind of a pad here. I always like this vintage one. It's got an interesting sound. So I'll just copy what I did in the piano roll there, bring it down here. My B. I forgot, these are super loud. I think we're gonna take the octave down. All right, so this next part, this is typically how I work out my 808s. I'm going to copy exactly what the kick does. I'm going to find a good 808 one hit. I like one hits the best. You may find some, you know, really nice VSTs for 808s. But, you know, I grew up on sampling in general. And that's really more of what I've been doing most of my life. You do not have to use one hits. A lot of people really do prefer the VST. So I'm going to go ahead and find an 808 tune to C. I don't know if we like that sound for this song. Going for something a little more melodic, not like crunchy and aggressive. I think that's the one. I'm going to turn this way down before I blow out anybody's eardrums again. So you can do a lot of interesting things with 808s. A lot of people these days are making, like riffs with them, treating it a lot more like a standard bass line, which I do find interesting. So all I'm doing here is I am changing the root notes to be exact. First root note is E, second one is C. And you can have them with some staccato, and they don't have to be real long and dragged out like this. But that's how I want it to be for this one. Alright, so the pattern is almost the same. It's just on this second one. Let's see what the difference really is. Not much of a difference. I'll just... I don't know, guys. This is the first video I'm making. I just have so much I want to talk about. So much I want to show you guys. But I'm going to have to break this up. So this one will just be about making a verse, I think. Because I do like to take my time. I don't like to rush. And I don't want to teach you guys that rushing is somehow the best way to do it. Yeah. I don't know. That's why I really have, I don't really listen to trap music. It's not, I mean, I do, but like I prefer old school stuff. You know what I mean? I prefer a boom bap sound. But I've really enjoyed the production of more trap type of music. Just because it's, all you need is like the drums and the 808, a little basic chord progression, and you got, like, you can rap on this already. We don't even have a little melody part down. So I'm just going to find a nice plucky kind of sound. Something similar to like a piano or something. To create like a little melody to go in the background of this. If I want to like, let's see if we can find an interesting one. Let's go right down to pluck here. Let's see what we got. Nah. That's the one. It's another thing I'd recommend as you're going, like, trust your instincts. Just use the things that you would enjoy hearing. Don't worry about what you think people want or any of that stuff, because truth is there's going to be millions of people out there, I'm sure, that have a very similar taste to you. So you do what you like. You pick the sounds you like. You be confident as you're going forward. I take my time in a lot of my process, but I do not take my time picking sounds. I roll with it. I just go. I just send it. And in my opinion, that's the best way to do it, is just trust your instincts. Know that you have good taste and interesting ideas. This would be so much easier with my piano for my MIDI controller right now. This part of the process is where it is important to have some musical knowledge. I'm no musical genius or anything, but I know my way around the chords. I know some basic scales, and I do have, a natural gift for music. So this will just be something real simple here. So I usually pan my melodies a little bit to the left, as when they put the vocals in, you do want to pan it slightly to the right. That's just typically the standard. That can just be looped. So there's still a decent bit to go for the melody here. It's not going to be it. That's just an element of it. I do think we're going to start with my effects now. We're going to add a little chorus to that. Oops. And because that's not going to be exactly what I would call like the lead melody, it's like a supporting melody. I'm going to go ahead and throw some pretty heavy reverb on it and make it just sort of blend. I forgot when I have it, anything solo, my mic is going to be off. The only thing I'm not loving about this sound so far or this little melody part. There we go. Just not loving the little delay of the reverb. I want the reverb to attack immediately. So when I'm doing like a supporting melody like this before I get to my main one, I'm going to be a little zany with the effects, you know what I mean? Most of the time, you don't want to go overboard with your effects. You're just going to end up muddying up your production. Most of the time, you want to keep your effects to a minimum, at least effects such as reverb and chorus. Other effects like, you know, some distortion to change samples or compressors, expanders, stuff like that. That you can use a little more frequently on a track, but I wouldn't just throw reverb or chorus on everything in your track. Usually I pick one element to add those sort of psychedelic sounding effects to, and it just creates a little wetness in the track. But I'm going to blend that with more dry sounds so that everything that I'm trying to do with the melody and the chord progression will be very audible and very front and center. So you could think of this more as just like a little blended part. Okay, so let's see. I'll get another sound in here. I always love this one. It's my favorite. Let's turn it way down. And we'll move this over to the right because that's just for blending. It's not going to be my main melody. So I really don't have the language to explain exactly what you want to do when you're making a melody. Like I said, normally I'm just going to play this on a keyboard. So this is not my standard way to go about this. Alright, so now that's half of my melody. I do want to create some variation. That's all it has to be, something that simple. You know, we'll start. Yeah, something real simple there. Now, one thing, and this is all music production. You really want to blend sounds. So that's just one sound that I'll use for this melody. Typically, I at least have two. So on my next one, I'm going to try to find something. I'm going to go to one of my go-tos. Where is it? From the sound sets that actually come with Studio One. Snowbound. I like this one. So this is more of a pad, but I'm gonna add this. Just see what it sounds like, you know what I mean? Turn it down a bit. I'm actually thinking for this one that I'm not in love with this astute sound. I actually think we need to make it something a little more interesting. So now I gotta change it up a little. My original sound didn't ring out, so I had to change the way it was structured in the piano roll. I think I like that sound better. So the last thing I'm going to do, and this is just me. A lot of verses do not do this. So a verse is, 16 bars, and halfway through, I like to add either some type of percussion element to create a variation in the second half of the rap verse, or I like to add a melodic element, just something to give the song some movement, and usually that will lead me into however I want to change for the chorus. But we're not going to get into the hook today on this one just because this is already super long. So how's this sound? Ooh, it's super loud. Any type of fluty sound always sounds real dope in trap. Let's make sure we turn this down a bit. And this does not have to be anything. If I was just playing it on my keyboard right now, I could just be popping out melodies left and right. It's a bit cumbersome working in the piano roll like this. All right, so I know everything I've done so far for melodies, I started with E on the first one, started with B on the next one. The last note in my chord is G, so that's where I'm going to begin this sort of added melody. Now, see, with a flute melody, you usually want to have something a little faster. You don't want to just have like drawn out like doo 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 doo. You know, with a flute, you don't really want that. Try it that way. That ain't it. Okay. so that's the loop. Put some variation on the next part. I'm not married to the sound either, so just you kind of want to get your have another piano sound or a flute sound that I really think might work here. But right now I'm just getting my melody. I can change the sound later. I hate piano roll. Alright, so that'll be the piano part. And you know, sometimes you create a melody around a chord progression. You know, maybe I just want to add this in the chorus later on. I don't know. You're never wasting time sitting here and figuring out a little melody that you like. Never wasting your time. Because you can use it, you know, for a bridge, for a chorus. Hell, you could even base a whole other song around this if you wanted. Okay, so I created a one hit in one of my sample packs that I've made for my website. Which one? Yeah, I think it's in here. The tremolo flute. So I created this sound by sampling a song that is public domain, basically. I mean, it's called CC0. So all I did was take one hit, add a one part of one drawn out flute note of a song that was CC0, which means it's basically a free clearance. Sorry, I always forget that when I solo, you can't hear me anymore. So sonically speaking, this is not exactly the best sounding instrument. But what it makes up for sonically, or what it lacks sonically, it makes up for an organic sound. The reason why I like this piano sound so much is because it's not just a flat sound like you'll hear this one as flat. Let me play it on its own. And then the difference between my flute and the first one I use is that mine has some vibrato on it. You know, it changes the velocity. I wouldn't say velocity. That's a production term. What do they call that? I can't think of the term right now when stuff gets louder in music. But it's played live. You know what I mean? So I change it into a one hit, and you get a more live sounding instrument out of it. Now, I know I said we're not going to mess too much with effects, but this is more of a layer at this point. So I'm going to add I'm going to add some reverb to one of the flutes. All right, I think that's about all I'm gonna do for now. And really, I mean, just to be clear, this is the bare bones of a track here. You still have a, at least a hook to write, hopefully a bridge. I love to include bridges in the beats that I produce. But even then, like, there's so much more to production besides what I've just showed you, which is the basic elements, your drums, your chord, your melody. Yeah, there's all sorts of texturing and blending. And sometimes some of that stuff isn't super necessary. So, as I'm finishing up here, the last thing I want to tell you, if you're a beginner here, is that you do not want to overproduce. Maybe you have a background of being a live musician and production is something you've gotten into later on. I mean, that's how I started out, like in actual bands, singing, playing guitar, drums, piano, that kind of thing. So when I got into production, I treated it very similarly to how I would write songs for my bands, which is, a lot of change ups, a lot of, harmonies, melodies. So when you're creating a rap beat, you got to remember, if you're creating it for the purpose of being able to sell or give to a rapper, or even just, working on a rap beat yourself for your own rap song, you want to leave room for the rapper to make the song. You know what I mean? The production should be fairly basic. I mean, listen to, Nicki Minaj, DaBaby, Drake. Like, the only elements that are ever really complex in these songs, as far as hits go. I mean, if you get into the discography, they definitely will have a lot more variation to the beats. You know what I mean? But as far as hits go, you have very simple sounding music, and the only complexity comes in the drum pattern, especially with the hi-hat rolls and some of the snare hits, which is something that would be my next part of production here, would be adding percussive sounds to my drum track. But anyway, I'm going to play what I got for you here. I hope you learned a little something. Hit me in the comments. I've been doing this a while. I have a pretty great amount of knowledge. Sometimes I talk a little too much. So, my language isn't always, whew. Alright, I fuck with this. Woo, woo, woo. Yeah. Alright. Sometimes my language isn't the best for basic communication. But you let me know what kind of stuff you guys would be interested in learning about. And, if I don't know about it, we'll learn about it together. So please follow me on YouTube. Leave comments. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. I'm not an authority. I am self-taught. You know what I mean? And as a self-taught person, I'm always humble, and I'm always super interested in learning from people who are better than me. That's Jesus, I'm saying too much. If there's one more piece of advice I could give you, never, ever act like you know more than other people. Always assume that somebody has something to teach you when it comes to music, and always glean what you can from them. That's how I've progressed with, you know, no one's ever taught me anything. I just always wanted to play and hang out with people who were much better than me because I wanted to get to where they were. I didn't want to tell them, well, yo, I got my own thing going on. So, like, you know, what I play is pretty awesome. You just don't understand it. No, I always just say, hey, like, teach me something. So please teach me something in the comments. Tell me what you want to hear next time. And I'll catch you later. Like and subscribe.